Good morning to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista. Welcome to our tropical weather video for today, June 20th, 2024. And we have a lot going on today because the tropics, after Tropical Storm Alberto formed yesterday, things continue to remain busy today. Looks like we have a few other areas of interest to watch for potentially our next couple, not just one, but our next potentially couple of named storms to form. And we're still only in the month of June. So definitely things remaining very busy for June. Let's start off by reviewing them all with the National Hurricane Center homepage. Basically everything that we need to know with the tropics right on the National Hurricane Center homepage. And this basically says everything we need to know. We have Tropical Depression Alberto now. Made landfall earlier this morning in Mexico, and it is now moving inland. It's going to rain itself out over Mexico, and it won't be much of a threat. At least the threat will be dying down along the coastline, and it'll be more of an inland threat in terms of rain. But Alberto dying out, 35 miles per hour, central pressure of 999 millibars right now. And if you're tracking it, it is located at 22.3 north and 99.4 west. So there's Alberto dying out. And if we take a look at the next 7 days with what is expected, well, Alberto might not be the only thing we need to watch for Mexico. It looks like there will be another area of interest. This has a 50% chance over the next week that things will once again be conducive for another system to form in the Bay of Campeche. But in the shorter term, besides that, we want to focus our attention now to what is now Invest Area 92L, because we talked about how this wouldn't be much of a concern for formation anymore. Well, it looks like, as obvious with Mother Nature, things change very quickly, and it looks like as of today, 92L is practically on the verge of becoming a tropical system, a very small one, but we're going to have aircraft recon in later today to investigate this storm. But it looks like we might have more formations, and this is definitely, if you saw what I posted on Twitter earlier, this is definitely a lot more active than you would expect for the month of June. And when all is said and done, we might have our next two named storms for this hurricane season, potentially, if bearing in mind that both of these areas go on to develop and become tropical systems with names. We might as well have three named storms in total by the time everything is said and done for the month of June. It's definitely looking very active. And let me actually really quickly refresh the satellite loop. And you can see generally what the picture is. We have Alberto moving in over Mexico after bringing lots of heavy rain to Mexico. And as we talked about the humongous size of Alberto, even though it was able to concentrate yesterday, it was still very broad to the point that it was bringing quite incredible storm surge into Texas, especially given that this storm made landfall in Mexico. As much as 2 to 4 feet of storm surge was observed in some coastal towns of Texas, and not even southern Texas, but even places closer to Galveston as well experienced lots of storm surge. And the threat for storm surge still continues today. There's still the influence of Alberto there, although obviously it's not as strong. But it looks like Alberto might not be the only thing we need to worry about now. We're now starting to watch the southwestern Caribbean. You can see the general influence of this Central American gyre pattern still remains in the Caribbean. Looks like we have more clouds and thunderstorms beginning to develop. National Hurricane Center once again already has mentioned this. And then you can see Invest 92L here off the southeast coast. And I actually want to zoom in on this a little bit because you can see, very interestingly enough, if you look closely, it looks like there's already some sort of circulation associated with Invest 92L. As I talked about, regardless of whether or not it would be named, it was obviously going to have an impact anyways for portions of northern Florida and Georgia and even South Carolina. And I think that remains unchanged. They're still going to get showers and thunderstorms and some disturbed weather regardless of whether or not this becomes a name. But I think the biggest difference is now is that it looks more organized. And environmentally wise, 92L is not in as bad of an environment as maybe we once thought. And it looks like this has only 24 hours, but especially given, the past several years with these systems, especially as they traverse the Gulf Stream, and I'll show you in a moment, the Gulf Stream is very warm. It seems like there's just some sort of magic that as soon as they pass over the Gulf Stream, bam, they suddenly become tropical systems, even if it's just hours before landfall. And I'll show you environmentally, wind shear wise. This is the wind shear over 92L. It's roughly located in here, and you can see these greens. What do they represent? Generally, more favorable upper level winds. So the wind shear is not that bad over Invest 92L, so that's a plus. And thermodynamically as well, people are also beginning to mention that Invest 92L now has a pretty good shot. This is from a tweet from Andrew Moore. I found this pretty interesting. He mentioned southeast flow in the mid-level, in the low and mid levels, induced some shear overnight and this morning, but shear will lessen out over the next 12 hours. And obviously, Invest 92L will be crossing the Gulf Stream early tomorrow morning near Duranno maximum. And that's a term, by the way, if I could really quickly explain, basically means the time of day where there's most convective activity over the ocean, and that tends to happen right in the overnight into early morning hours, just as the sun is beginning to set. So basically, he's saying that 92L will be crossing the Gulf Stream right into the overnight, into early morning hours, as once again, we're expecting this to probably move into the southeast sometime tomorrow. And that could potentially work in 92L's favor. We might end up seeing this form. The next name on the list is Barel, and let's see what the GFS has in terms of that. And you could see, very interestingly enough, analyzed at least as of 60, so this was roughly earlier this morning. I guess this is a little bit more of an accurate time frame, but you can see the GFS is actually indeed showing some vorticity with this. Although it's small, one thing that there'll probably be with this system is that it is going to be a very small system. But you can see the GFS does try to close this off a little bit. There is some sort of small, tightly compact area of vorticity that tries to spin up. And then you can see by hour 36, basically hour 36. So basically tomorrow afternoon, this is basically already inland over portions of northern Florida. And yeah, that is going to have a very short time. But I will mention, once again, it is a very small system crossing over very warm waters of the Gulf Stream. So this might have a chance to spin up. And I do want to emphasize the fact that regardless, there will still be disturbed weather probably for portions of northern Florida and Georgia tomorrow, and probably into Saturday as well, as this system moves in. But a very interesting storm nonetheless. You could actually see at hour 30, just before it goes in on the GFS, you notice there is definitely some vorticity, and at least in terms of a low-level center, at least the GFS might be trying to pick up on that, at least as it shows some sort of closed isobar there. So yeah, the models are definitely picking up on this. It's weak, obviously, because it's a very small low pressure, and it's obviously in an area as well of very high environmental pressures. The general air pressure of the storm surrounding it is very high, so it's definitely going to remain a weak system, but nonetheless an interesting one for sure. And then you can see, as we head into the next 2 to 3 days, notice back down south in the Bay of Campeche, GFS once again beginning to spin something up. Like Alberto, it's probably going to remain broad in the Gulf, although probably not as broad. It definitely does remain broad, though. This is the GFS. You can definitely see it's not as compact. It's not tight, especially not like 92L is, but it's not as huge in terms of its influence as Alberto was. Alberto had vorticity and a general envelope of vorticity that stretched all the way into Texas, and obviously we saw with that, we got tropical storm impacts all the way in Texas with Alberto. But with this storm, seems like it's going to be a little less on the broad side and a little more concentrated, and looks like around hour 96, that's when it begins to move in over Mexico. So we might see this form, and I'm going to show you in just a little bit. The Gulf is definitely warm enough for more formations to occur, so we'll have to watch. But you can see the GFS picking up on it, and then roughly over the next 4 to 5 days, it once again moves in over Mexico. And this is really a big threat, especially with the rain, because as we talked about, these broad systems, they may not be strong in terms of their wind speed, but they're very broad, and though they tend to have lots of moisture with them, especially coming from a Central American gyre setup, and they tend to be a huge issue with rain. And this storm is coming right off the heels of Alberto, which dumped already lots of rain in Mexico. So this is definitely going to be a threat for rain to be concerned with. And then after that, looking over the next week, maybe things obviously quiet down a little bit. I mean, they definitely have to quiet down because it's already very active for June. Looks like we might have maybe our next named storm or two over the next several days, but looking afterwards, after these two systems, nothing else major beginning to pop up or really showing up yet on the models as we head into the end of June. But I can imagine as we head into the start of July, things will probably once again begin to pick up. But really quickly, I want to show you over the Gulf of Mexico. Generally, despite the fact that we had Alberto, look, especially in the Bay of Campeche, and it might take a day or two for things to really, for sea surface temperatures being knocked down to really show up, but still, at least of the latest graphics, sea surface temperatures in the Bay of Campeche, they're still 30 degrees Celsius. So we still have upper 80s, even low 90s to work with in terms of whatever happens in the Bay of Campeche over the next several days. And then the Gulf of Mexico as a whole, notice we still have widespread readings 29s. And here are some 28s, but trust me, either way, this is really not that much of a concern. The Gulf is still above normal. And especially given the fact that once everything clears out, we still have a huge heat ridge over portions of the Northeast. The Gulf, I can assure you, will warm back up in no time. The Gulf, especially this time of year, warms back up basically in an instant right after we get clear conditions. So no matter what, the Gulf will always be warm enough. But just want to put into perspective, things are still very warm and definitely still very favorable for development to occur in the Bay of Campeche. And then off the southeast coast, kind of want to zoom out a little bit, but you can also see, especially in this portion right along the Gulf Stream, you can see there's a stripe of where we see sea surface temperatures as much as 28 degrees Celsius. And that is definitely very high, and especially very high for a small storm like what 92L will be. I can assure you, really, as soon as this is going to move over the Gulf Stream, it wouldn't surprise me, honestly, if this just absolutely blows up suddenly, and even if it may not look like much now, as soon as it moves over the Gulf Stream, it almost seems like there's some sort of magic that happens, that it suddenly tightens up and convection blows up enough to the point that sometimes within hours it is able to become a nameable tropical system. So there's definitely that in favor of 92L, and it still has definitely a day, at least a day left over water. And for, it may not seem like a lot, but once again, for these kind of systems, it's definitely more than enough time, especially given that sometimes they tend to spin up within hours even. So it's definitely interesting to see what exactly will happen. But once again, tropics remaining busy, especially for June. We'll see how things progress over the next several days, but it looks busy. But hopefully as we head towards the end of the month, things wind down a little bit and get a little bit more closer towards normal as we head into July. But I mean, this was definitely very much signaled in advance. We've been saying that since early June and last month, that around this time in June, that things would generally look more favorable atmospherically for formations to occur in the Atlantic. And now we're seeing that play out. So it's definitely interesting to show how sometimes instances where we do forecast things to get active, it's always interesting to see how they pan out. And especially in this case, they pan out to the way that we indeed saw it coming. So definitely goes to show that the forecasts do have some sort of credit, at least in terms of long range. And it'll definitely be interesting to see what they show as we head into July, after we get all of this activity out of the way, and as we head towards the month of June. With that being said, though, I'm going to end it off for today's video. Probably won't upload again today unless we have something drastic happen this afternoon with 92L. Maybe I might upload something else. But with that being said, though, I'm going to end it off for here. Thanks for watching. If you like what you saw today, I always encourage you, like, comment, subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments as well. If you have any questions for me, I would always be very much enthused to answer. With that being said, have a great day, a safe day, and a blessed day as always. Stay safe, peace, love, and kindness to you all, and we will talk again very soon.